Welcome everyone to another episode of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts, and today my guest is Dr. Mike Trubetskov, who's a metal producer from Melbourne, Australia, originally from Russia. We deep dive into the world of metal production, which is very specific and very fascinating in my opinion as well. We talk about being okay with making mistakes and learning from them, as well as taking listeners on a journey through your production. All that and more, stay tuned for this episode of What's That Sound podcast. You're listening to What's That Sound with your host, Stu Watts. Welcome everyone to another episode of What's That Sound podcast. My name's Stu Watts, and today I'm here with Dr. Mike Trubetskov.
What's up?
Hey. Welcome. Thanks for trekking out here, man.
Thanks, Gibbs, for having me.
No worries. So, tell us a bit about yourself, man. Let's take it back to the start. Where did music come into play for you, man?
Music came to me at the age of 5 years old when I started playing piano.
Cool.
So classical piano music in Russia, that sort of thing. I played for 8 years, and then there was a turning point when I was like kind of sick of it. Probably year 7, and then my music teacher said, yeah, you can take a break or you can leave if you want. Mm-hmm. And then I considered it and I didn't leave.
Good.
It's like at a time I realized, I can't live without music, quite literally. And so all my bloody life path is about carving the way to make music my life and my career.
Yeah.
Quite literally.
Who were the musical like interests at that time?
Well, when I was a kid, nothing in particular. I liked some classical music. I played a lot of Bach. Shostakovich was awesome. Mm-hmm. Rachmaninoff was bloody fucking amazing.
Yeah.
And all of that sort of thing, some Grieg and different classical composers. But obviously you can't, these are my influences from my childhood, but you can't quite talk about that when you're a child. And then I grew up and I'm like, I want to get into first I listened to techno and pop, and I started producing with the software called Dance EJ. Have you heard of that? It's fucking bullshit.
Dance EJ. Never heard of it.
Yeah, so it's
I was on Acid Pro.
Yes, I've done that afterwards, and it's much more advanced. Dance EJ is just bloody fucking shit. All it has is samples, couple of snare builds, maybe 10 in total, which you can select from, and then you can just kind of come up with some loops, patterns and all. And
so it's very limited.
Very limited. It was good enough to get my head around how the production works. So I was really young, maybe 11.
So what age was that?
11.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, wow. Yeah, so starting early, that's good, man.
I was starting early, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
And then at the time, I was also messing around with Cubase and MIDI keyboard because my father bought me a keyboard to kind of, build up on my piano skills and just play piano. But I actually was finding some synths and playing with synths. Yep. So I was interested in electronic music. Mm-hmm. And then it all changed when I discovered Muse. Yeah. And that was at the age of 13. Origin of Symmetry fucking blew my mind.
Unbelievable album.
It is still my top album.
Oh, yeah.
So Muse and Rammstein were my first heavy bands, and it all went from there, I guess.
Yep. And so do you remember at that time if you were listening to the production elements of things, or was it purely just taking music in?
Yeah, I was. I couldn't understand what I'm listening to, but looking back, yes, I was. Firstly, I was connecting with emotions really hard, and that's probably my biggest trait today as well, and always been. I can resonate with music emotionally really hard, and that's probably very important as a producer, so that you can resonate with artists' music, right? Yeah. So there was that, but also I was always listening to music in a production perspective, thinking, why does it make me punch so hard? Why does it feel so heavy and so cool? Rammstein, Sweeter, if you know that song. Old school. Yeah. But it I
only know Du Hast, so
it's from similar eras. So you can relate to Du Hast.
Just power,
it's so powerful. And I was like, why is it so cool? And I was messing with synths, replicating those sounds at a time unconsciously, and I was crap. But at least the intent was there.
Well, I think unless you had heaps of money, everyone was crap.
Correct.
You can't afford the good synths back then.
Yeah, you couldn't, and software was crap too. It was very limited, and it was very hard to get decent sounds.
Yep.
I remember I somewhat later, maybe at the age of 15, I started actually playing the guitar. I picked it up and I started recording myself. And I had that crappy Marshall AVT combo, if you know that one. And the way I recorded it, I was messing around with microphones. I bought a dynamic mic and I had a stack of books, with just instead of a mic stand, because I hadn't a mic stand. I didn't have it. I had a stack of books and I set up the mic and it was rolling around. It was bullshit, but still like, okay, looking back, actually I was doing something, like my first experiments, right?
Totally. And you would have been noticing the difference between where the mic's positioned and stuff like that.
I was. It all sounded bad.
Yeah.
All of it was no good. But
I remember
was like,
my original setup to get sounds into the computer. The very first setup was like literally recording to a portable tape.
Yep.
Not even a 4-track. This was like real early days. It was like the ones that you could press record on that had an inbuilt mic. That was recording, and then I'd use the computer mic to mic up that playback and to get it into my computer so that I could listen to it on the computer. Then it was using the computer mic with like the most basic sound recorder on the computer and, you know, just micing up a guitar amp and, you know, a little combo, and it would sound like shit. And it was like, there was no way to avoid it. So do you remember if you noticed any producers at that stage? Were there like anyone that you were like noticing the names of?
It's interesting. I have a weird personality in that regard. I'm bad at names, just originally, and that's something that I don't like in myself, and I should be developing. But it is what it is. You know, it's just like I noticed that it's a bit of a feature. So it's always been hard for me to remember. Oh, what's the name of this actor? I remember the face vividly. I can't remember the name that well. Same with producers. I remember their work vividly, like what sort of music they made, and I would say this song, this album sounds amazing, but I don't remember who did it. I did some research afterwards and kind of re-educated myself, but still, I was never good at it. So for me, it always was like a bunch of collections of music that I always felt sounds just incredible, and these were my big influences.
Yeah, love it. And so when did you start to focus more? You're obviously dabbling in, you know, synth playing, guitar playing, recording into your computer, arrangement, that sort of stuff. When did it get serious for you?
So serious. So like it was a series of serious progress. Well, firstly, I always had my music, and I always wanted it there, and I was always recording some demos which were shit, but there were some good ideas actually. Just a couple. I was posting them on forums and receiving some feedback, but whatever.
Cool.
Things started to get more serious after I, played in a bunch of like self organized bands, which were also not good. Like. Musicians were not that interested. Things did start to get serious when I joined a bigger band. Not huge, but more serious. And that was the band called Gift of Madness. They were active since 2003. I joined them in maybe 2008, 9. So
when did you come to Australia?
2014.
Okay. So this was in Russia still?
Yeah, still all in Russia, And so when I joined that band, well, maybe before that, I went to get some lessons on guitar, and we focused on complicated techniques such as Satriani, Vai, sort of shreds. And that allowed me to quickly grow.
Cool.
But that's not quite something to do with the recording side of things, more than performing, right?
Sure.
And so when I joined that band, I was at a decent level. We started playing and we started composing, and my ideas came to some fruition as well. And finally, we hit a studio to record the album. That was the moment, like a light bulb moment for me, because we hit a good studio with amazing producer. His name is Arkady Navakho.
Cool.
His studio is Navakho Hut in Moscow. He focuses on metal, heavy stuff, always been, and he's been an amazing inspiration. I could play, but I didn't know how to record, because recording metal guitar is a sophisticated process. You want certain level of clarity, which is not available for one take performance. I didn't know that. I was like, oh, I'm playing, is it good? I didn't know what is good, what not. I couldn't hear the details in notes that were off. Like
Yeah, it's just an awareness thing, right? Like it's just like
Yeah,
you
just
don't know until you know.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And then he showed me, okay, like this section is amazing, but this one is no good. You have to punch that in separately, or you have to play into it, playing a couple of notes before, so that the transition is smooth and you can cut it and merge. And all of that hit me so hard, and I realized, okay, that's how you do it. And although I was busy studying, I'm a scientist by my education, so I was busy studying. I was busy moving abroad, organizing the move here, apparently.
Yep.
So that was taking some of my time. But
Sure.
I started to record properly at home. Some covers, and then we did a single for that band when I came here. That was 2014. I did the single remotely. I recorded it, and I actually mixed it as well.
Yep.
That was one of my first mixes.
Yep.
It sucked.
Yep.
I thought it's amazing.
Yeah,
it sucked.
fucking oath.
It hit me hard.
Yeah.
It's like the response that the mix was no good hit me so hard. Unfortunately, I was naive and young. But the recording was good. So at least that was kind of set together.
I think the thing is like, we don't know what we don't know.
Yep.
It's only until we're educated on something that we can have an awareness of what to do in the future. But I think you have to start somewhere, and everyone's first stuff is going to suck. No one can miraculously out of the gate just be amazing unless you're a child prodigy, which is like obviously the rarest thing possible. So I think anyone that first starts, you just have to accept it, and you just have to be like, that's where I am.
Yes.
That's where I am.
Well, it's also, I think, every producer, every musician has some degree of talent. Some have more, some may have a bit less.
Sure, yep.
But having the talent itself is not enough.
No.
You may have a breakthrough song if you're talented and don't work that hard. You may be lucky once, but then it's not a longevity game. It's not a career. If you want a career, you want to invest into your talent by surrounding it with a foundation, with hard work, and with systems that allow you to be focused and allow you to work properly.
100%. And the learning has to be continuous.
Yes, absolutely. Never stop it. Because at some point I thought that my mixes are great, and I stopped for a bit, and apparently I missed some.
Yeah.
I mean, I missed some knowledge and catching up.
Yeah. Yeah, right. I mean, it's a fascinating thing because again, it's like you only are aware of your weaknesses when they're pointed out to you. It's very difficult for you to see your own weaknesses. And it's that classic Dunning-Kruger thing, at the start, you think that you are better than you are.
Yes.
You get a reality check, you dive down, and then you slowly, gradually build up. And that's across the board of everything that you learn.
Anything in life.
And so you might be amazing at tracking guitar, but you might suck at tracking vocals or mixing vocals or something. And so all of those different areas of your learning will have those things where you realize, I need to put some work in here. And
Correct.
So let's talk about then some of those like early sessions of bands that you were working with, for the first few years.
Yes,
what did that look like?
Yeah, so I started offering my services when I came down here because the band was there and it kind of felt like it's done and I don't have any other outlets. I have no network. I'm no one here. I'm new.
Yep.
I know no one.
Yeah.
And firstly, I started to offer free mixes for my mates in Russia remotely.
Yep.
Right. So some of my mates who I've been touring with or like just playing some music in some regard. And these were just mixes, maybe covers, maybe their own material that had no budget, stuff like that. And I tried to make the best out of it. And I think the mix, like the idea behind the mixes was great, but it was not yet carved to deliver, obviously, but I was at the start. I didn't charge for it. Then I started charging $50 per mix,
Okay.
So, and started to work with some Australian artists.
Yep.
And here's the interesting thing that kind of caught up to me. At a time, 2014, 2015, well, I was new and I didn't really know the industry that well, but it seemed to me that old school metal is popular.
Right.
And modern metals at a time seemed like a small niche, metalcore kids all, and nothing else.
Yeah.
And it felt to me that, I'm actually not into old school much. I'm not a Metallica fan.
Yeah, right.
I appreciate and respect them, but I'm not a fan.
Okay, yep, cool.
My influences are different. Meshuggah, Fear Factory, Killswitch Engage.
Yes.
Just a bit more.
So it's kind of like, it was at the time those bands were breakthrough and like groundbreaking,
Yes.
They were doing sounds like bringing in industrial sort of sounds that
Yes.
It just sounded crazy.
Always
and just
been
like
inspired. Yep.
unreal at the time, and I'm sure obviously now it's a bit dated because new things have come along. But yeah,
Correct.
that's fascinating. So it's like it's not old school in terms of it's not just like four guys in a room playing their music and you hit record and it's like no, there's some production elements. There's some other stuff that's a part of this music that makes it sound what it sounds like.
Absolutely correct.
Yeah,
Absolutely correct.
Yeah.
So the approach to recording such music is somewhat modern, and I always applied that. So I always used my Axifix for guitars at the start because that's all I got, and I learned how to use it, and it was a great one.
Yep.
And I tried to apply that approach, a modern approach with organic and natural feel and honest feel, still applying that in regard to the artists that I was able to work with. So it was a mixture of different bands, but some were old school indeed, some were rock, old school rock, some were just rock. Not too much of heavy stuff actually at the start, heavy.
Yep.
Getting heavier bands was harder because you had to be in the community, and I wasn't for obvious reasons. I was new. And so it took me years to network and meet people until they started to trust me and until I was able to deliver some good results for them.
Yep. And so how did that what did that look like? Like what made it what did you work on, I guess is a good question to get you to that point where people started to trust you?
It's an interesting one. Well, firstly, I networked. I met people at gigs.
Yep.
I listened to their music. I didn't just say, hey, you're cool. I listened to music precisely and I highlighted what I liked about it and I tried to make compliments to musicians. I said, your double kicks are fucking amazing. You're tight. And it was not just like, I meant it, right?
Yeah. You done your research and that's what you felt from the music.
Yes, correct.
Yep.
And so some of that carried through. Maybe 20% of those initial contacts became clients, maybe 10%.
Yeah.
Some.
Still a good number.
Some.
Yeah.
I've done that. At the same time, I just kind of kept my head down and kept improving, kept working.
Yep.
You know, like at a time I dreamt to record a band. I was just mixing.
Yeah.
And I realized at some point that it's not enough because they are not recording to the standard that I feel like is meeting what they want and what they need. And so I started to offer guitar recording. I can't even remember the first project where we recorded guitars, but I think I've done a lot of session work myself because I was a good guitarist.
Yep.
And then I was comfortable enough to see, okay, I can record myself. I know the techniques. I kind of troubleshooted my chain. I know that, this needs this much gain. This needs a DI box, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then people just started.
Knows his shit.
Yeah. So I figured it out and I started small and then, okay, first recording session happened.
Yeah.
And then another project, we recorded drums with a mate producer. That happened. And then eventually, okay, I know nothing about setting up mics. I only read about it. So I observed a person doing it. And I'm like, well, okay, this is sophisticated in a way. Okay, there are 8 mics or 10 mics and all they have to be calibrated and all. And it's overwhelming, but it's nothing. It's not rocket science.
Yes, yeah.
It's just, it takes time. And then I started doing my own sessions. Inevitably, I made mistakes. Some sections, some mics were clipped. Some mics were were padded and the signal was too low. And you fix it up then.
Yeah.
You just make mistakes and you learn from them.
Do you know what I think about? This is a funny thought, is like how many of the great albums that we listen to that we're like, this is amazing, have mistakes in them? Because you'd never know.
You'd never know. You'd
like,
never know.
Were the overheads like one of the mics was turned off so they just use it as a mono overhead? Like things like that. You just would never know. So it's like, it's okay to make mistakes. Like it's totally fine. Like,
unless you learn and improve and don't make them in the future. Or, well, if you do, you learn again.
Well,
right?
and I think the thing is like, what you learn from those mistakes is like, okay, what do I need to do to fix it here? Like if I did accidentally only record one of the overheads, how do I get that to sound good in a stereo mix?
Yes.
Something like that.
You still can do it. There are compromises, but you still can do it. You can make it work.
Yep.
You just have to do it.
And then you never know, because the next time that you go to record, one of those mics might not be working and you don't have another option for an overhead. So it's like, guess we're going with one.
Absolutely right.
I love it. Now I want to get specific about metal because it's such a fascinating world for me. Yes. My exposure to metal I mean, I always knew about. My dad listened to Black Sabbath, Metallica, there's. Do you know of Rage, the TV program?
Yes.
We always recorded the Saturday night specials because they had guest
Beautiful.
programmers, right? And so the guest programmers would put on all of their favorite artists from all the different bands. So if it was a metal band, you'd see Iron Maiden, Metallica, all of those classics and stuff. So
cool.
I was educated to that pretty early on, and I was like, this is cool. Got into punk rock, and then when I was in year 11, the friends that I was friends with were metalheads.
Yep.
So I was exposed to Children of Bodom, what Cthulhu Dawn, what's that band? Anyway.
Yeah.
So that was my exposure to it. I listened to some hardcore, metal never really came to me, and I never really loved it. I like melodic stuff. So screaming for me sometimes is just too much for me.
Yes, I know.
But I'm very well aware
it's been a
of
threshold for me too.
Yeah, but I'm very well aware of the world because I was in it at some points in my life. And so what I've gathered from the metal world is that people are so friendly. They're some of the most friendly people you can meet. But they're also some of the most opinionated people that you can ever meet.
Yeah, ego game is real.
Yeah, and I want to know more about that because obviously in sessions you have to juggle personalities. And with people that are so intent on what they want their sound to be like, is that tough or is it easy?
It's all about the respect and trust they put in to you. And yes, I gotta say it may be hard. Yes, I gotta say it may be hard because sometimes, and I've had that quite recently, some people do trust you, but they still are concerned whether you can push them to the very top level. And indeed, it is hard. For example, mod metal, it's the cleanest production you can get.
Yes.
And it's the particular sound. Like if you have, for instance, if you record drums, you have your snare, you have too much bleed from cymbals, you're fucked. You cannot compress it enough. And they want the specifically compressed sound, 3 distressors, each taken up 10 decibels, 6-1. I'm not kidding. That's what I've done. And that's what they want.
Yeah.
And you got to make sure that you accommodate the need.
Yeah.
And
facts. Yeah.
it's like, it is that intense, and that's why top producers earn that much money and that much trust because it is that hard to make. So yes, and you just got to meet it. But before you are able to show it, and inevitably there will be a stepping stone in your career when you don't have that next level production yet, and you have a band that you have a chance to make the next level production with, but they need to trust you and they need to see that you're able to deliver. And sometimes you just get hit up with bands that don't need that, and you work and you do your best and it sounds amazing and it's great for the artist is grateful and their art has been realized, but it doesn't help you because you cannot showcase the other genre to the other musician, which requires a different sort of production within metal.
Yeah.
And yes, indeed, it is tough, and ego is real, and the pressure is real, and you just gotta. It's stressful. I recover for weeks sometimes.
Yeah, wow.
I'm not kidding, but you still can deliver.
Yeah, for sure. And that's another good point that you mentioned is the specificity of each individual subgenre of metal.
Yes.
If you tiptoe into another genre that isn't in that, you're fucked.
Completely,
and then they're like, "What are you doing, man? This is not what we're after." And again, they're very strong. This is generalizing, of course. I'm not saying everyone's like this, but I'm just saying, generally speaking, if you have broken that ability, I don't know what the word is, but if you've not met what their expectations are, it can potentially be a bad thing for the future.
Absolutely.
Yeah. How do you recover from that?
Well, firstly, I learned from my mistakes, as I said, and I developed a system where I talk about the expectations up front very precisely. I talk what the band's vision is, what they want to sound like, what they don't want to sound like. So there is a reference spectrum, right? I gather all the references. I talk to them if it's a serious project, if it's a production. We meet, we catch up, we talk if we can. So I just try to be on top of that game, and I try, and over time it gets easier to kind of read people's mind.
Yes.
It's a feature that every producer must have, reading what the intent is.
Absolutely.
And expressing. But how do you recover if you failed? And you will inevitably fail a few times. Maybe it's not the end of the world, maybe. So I don't think I've had projects that were completely canceled. I've had test mixes maybe 4 years ago which were not chosen. Okay, happens. And yes, it hurts your ego. Or you can go into discussions and develop a vision for the project, develop a proposal, and it's not chosen either. Or so if you have something canceled midway through, it's pretty shit. How do you recover? It's an interesting one because you have to kind of have a more objective belief in yourself and more objective vision of what you've come up, what your path is, and what value you are bringing to the community. And you have to read that the value is real. And I am not great at it at times. I sometimes miss it, and I'm sometimes really caught up in that bubble of immediate work. This was shit. That's a shit month. Something happened like that. And it's just like, I'm shit. So like I get depressed easily. But I guess just keeping the big picture open is important. And
it's one of those difficulties that I experience as well. Okay. As everyone that is a freelance music producer will know, that things go in waves. You're not always going to have, clients knocking down your door. There's going to be dry weeks, dry months.
Yes. Yes.
And so obviously money's important.
Yes.
It's how we live.
Yes.
But, it can influence how we're feeling a lot. And it can be challenging to be like, I know because I believe in myself and I believe in my output that something will come. And it always does.
It does.
I think, obviously I only know from my experience, but if you're producing something, if you care, if you care about your clients, if you care about your own work.
If you have genuine,
care for it, it'll come back to you.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, it will.
The other thing I want to touch on with metal is your sound is very natural sounding. And I know that is an interesting thing in the metal world as well, especially like you were saying with modern metal, where everything's pristine, everything, all the snares sound like gunshots, like, every single chug on a guitar is audible. Like, how do you toe the line? Like, and the other thing is blast beats. Like, blast beats are a thing in metal. How many hits are there? I'm manually triggering samples. I'm going through and saying, this is where the transient is, tab, transient, tab. For a 7-minute song, fuck that, that's going to take you a year.
It will, it will.
Let's talk about those specifics.
Yeah, so with the natural sounding metal, I don't think that I'm the very natural guy. And I noticed it, like, because there are guys who particularly do not use samples. There are guys who particularly like, we just record to tape. I don't think that it will cut anymore for the most of metal bands. So it's a smaller niche. I don't focus on that either. My approach is still maintaining reality and honesty and the feel. So like, I never want to dive into sterility, because sample replacing everything and using generic sounds, generic guitar amp seems leads to sterility, which I always hate it. And that's like been my ground up idea. I want the real music to come back. I want the feel to be there. At the same time, refined production is fine with me. Editing is fine with me. I had to grid drums 100% to the grid or 90% to the grid. Okay, if that's the sound, I'm up to it. With those sections in particular that you mentioned, blast beats, double kicks, it's a bit of a brain fuck, and you have to you
gotta do it.
You gotta do it. You have to spend time in editing. I don't manually trigger samples. I use Trigger by Steven Slate. It's pretty accurate. But in order to drift away from generic samples, I capture my own at the sessions where I have a chance to record, or I use my own from previous sessions and blend them and process them. They sound different. They sound great, and they give that refined edge, but they still sound like my production or band's production if we meet. And that probably been very nice outlet to expand upon.
Yeah, beautiful. Hey, thanks so much for listening so far. There is plenty more to come, so don't go anywhere. I just wanted to let you know that this podcast is made completely independently by myself with no sponsors. So if you like what you hear and you would like to show your support, you can send a donation to the PayPal link, paypal.me/whatsthatsound. The link is also in the show notes. Thanks so much for your support, and let's get back to it. Talk to me about what this is probably the most difficult question that I ask guests is, what is a good mix to you?
Good mix is the mix that translates the message of the song well. It makes a listener humanly connect and feel the song. Whatever it is about. Is it about violence? Is it about child abuse and psychological trauma? Or is it about breaking through depression? Or is it about just having fun and drinking? Okay, whatever it is, it gotta translate that, because that's music by definition. That's creative asset of the mix. Technically, I think all the elements have to be heard cleanly, presently, and match the vibe that artist was after. If they are after sampled, insanely tight drums, so be it. That's what they want. I'm not the one who chooses the feel. I'm the one who allows them to translate their musical idea. Absolutely. If it completely matches with mine, amazing. That's an amazing project. But if it doesn't, if I would do differently, and I have those cases sometimes, that's their call. Yeah. I'm here to work for them. I'm not the hero of this journey. I'm a hero of this journey when I work on my own music. And then what? I decide, okay, I want this way, and fuck you all.
Yeah.
But otherwise, if the artist is here, I'm here to execute and help them. Yeah. I'm not the hero anymore. I'm a guide.
Sure. I love it, man. And there was one other thing with specifically metal is the arrangement of metal music is... And I talked to you about this before the podcast, is I see a similarity with, dance music, specifically more like, deep house or trance or something like that, where metal takes you on a journey. The songs sometimes, and a lot of the time, are over 5-6 minutes long because of the way that they encapsulate an emotion. Yes. And the songs build and go on journeys, and they... How? Because for me, I work a lot in the pop world, even if it is in punk rock or, indie or whatever. It's pop based. Yes. The song structures are pretty generic with some changes. You might throw in a bridge or you might cut something in half. But for the most part, it's pop. Yeah. How do you know that you're doing the right arrangement for a metal song?
That's an interesting one. Let me take it back. So it was a complex, it was a complicated idea to break through at first when I was in an experienced mixer back in the day. When I first received my 11-minute song to mix, I was like, how the fuck do I approach it? Plus, the structure is irregular. It doesn't, like, some of those songs, they don't have any repeating pattern, or maybe it repeats once, like you have 2 choruses, that's it. Yeah. All the other things are just riffs, developments and all. And the answer is you just go for it and you just analyze it. You listen to it and you set up markers, and eventually at some point it becomes clearer. It's probably similar to an exposure with your progressive rock, progressive metal, Dream Theater sort of music, which is complex and you have to digest it, and similar to a classic music, I guess. Yeah. But if we're talking about arrangement itself, well, it's just more sophisticated. I try to make it diverse, so that if the song is that long already, probably makes sense to go all in and make second verse different from the first one. I like, even when I was recording my stuff, which was 6:30 one song, I remember going for a different sound for the chorus on guitar chords, particularly. So these little minuscule details change the feel. Quads are more open, so like I used a crunch channel instead of high gain, so they have more attack. And it just gives a different feel. It's more open. It's a bit more percussive, even though the melodics is the same. So, but I guess the answer is just it's more complex.
And you go for feel. It. Yeah.
You go by feel of the, firstly, entire thing. And I talk about that a lot. Losing that entire feel is shit. And you have to always remember that big picture in mind, because it's getting really easy as a downside to dive into details and lose the overall momentum. You just go for it.
I think it's great what you mentioned about, just different tonalities and like sonics is, again, it's a journey. It's you really are doing multiple things. It's like a storybook in a way. You know, you turn the page and there's new pictures, there's new colors, there's new, say if it goes to a darker area, you're going to use different, you know, sorts of sounds on the guitars, on the bass, potentially on the vocals, you know,
That's correct.
adding reverbs, delays that put you in a place. And it's fascinating, and I love it. It just makes me, it excites me, because I think that's why most people are producers in the first place, is because they hear sounds that other people don't hear. You know, and we go, fuck, that's so cool.
Yeah,
Let's
and
try
I want to share it with others.
Yeah, and achieve it.
It is.
Like, how do I get there? So it's such a cool. I feel like if you're going on those sorts of journeys, whether it is, you know, dance music or, you know, even hip hop somewhat, you know, you're using different effects for different sections of the songs and stuff like that. It's just such an exciting, it's an exciting thing.
I think that universally leads to a production journey, and coming up with a cool, tight, sophisticated production with all the colors particularly dialed in for sections. And you know, even in hip hop, you can record vocals differently. You can record them with different color if a verse is the same. You can try a different double. You can try call out layers left and right and top and bottoms, whatever it is, different synths, different underneath layers, and they're subtle, but they make a person feel. You're like a manipulator of one's feelings, but you can control and select which way you want it. It can be dark or it can be enlightening, and I think this is a very valuable conversation about art in general and how to create art that speaks to a person and provides a message, hopefully a positive one.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. Let's get nerdy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about your favorite, first of all, pieces of hardware. So microphones. If you use a lot of outboard gear, can you talk about that as well?
Yes. I actually received a bit of hate for using analog gear, and they said, "Oh, your mixes suck and you use analog gear. You should do better." I'm like, "Fucking hell, that was not nice." Actually, it fucked me hard, man.
Yeah.
But whatever.
Yeah.
But I do use some gear. When I first acquired it, it's been a great learning experience. At a time, I thought, "Oh, I'll be different from anyone else. I'll use analog and people use plugins." Again, naive, whatever. It did help me. So first, when I was using it, I was still learning. It was probably even a bit detrimental to my mixes because I was focusing on those subtle magic dust colors rather than the actual moves that make the mix. At the same time, though, getting into analog compressors particularly showed me that you can push them hard. You can push plugins harder. You can take 10 decibels of 1176 and it's fine. And before that, I didn't know that. I was like, okay, it's too much. It's 2 decibels. It's already like giving artifacts. No, it's not. It's the emulation is designed to mimic the behavior of analog. And when you use analog, you learn what it is without those artifacts, and then you can make those sacrifices. But favorite pieces, well, I use Rupert Neve 5043 for my mixes. Not very expensive compressor, sounds amazing, very modern, flexible. Really love it. There's also Audioscape Decomp, which is diode bridge compressor. Diodes apparently are my sound.
Yeah.
When I studied physics, diodes fascinated me for some reason.
Cool. That's awesome.
It's fucking sick, man.
I love to hear that. And so, like, what is it about them? Because I don't really understand. What is it?
Hard to say. Well, that compressor, it's a modern replica of Abbey Road, and it gives a certain sound. It kind of gives a wooden undertone, and you can push it so hard. There's no ratio. It's progressive ratio.
Sure.
And you can push it 8 decibels on drum bass, and it still sounds fucking sick.
Is it similar to what, a D160 or
I don't think so.
Nothing like that.
So
Way
probably
off.
not. I would say closest is Neve 33609.
Okay.
That's been my favorite emulation when I started with plugins, and then I wanted some other palettes which are analog, and I got this one, and it works.
Unreal. What about microphones?
Microphones, it's an interesting question because at my studio, I mainly record vocals, and if I do, I have Audio-Technica 4050, and I've not used it for a year or so.
Okay.
Which works very well, but it's just not a fit. I always didn't like a SM7, but I start to now. So like my path refines. I really like our E20.
Yeah.
I bought one.
Yeah, beautiful.
It's cool. I've not used it on vocals in modern metal yet, and I want to try it as an alternative to this one because I think it could give a different sort of sound, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, totally.
Our E20 is my inspiration. I used it on a kick out for modern metal band, and it was mint.
Yeah.
So that was cool. I like pencil mics on overheads.
Yep.
That's the tight 70s sort of sound, which is very applicable for today's productions, but just got to be refined properly. Snare depends. I like biodynamic a lot.
Okay.
That's nice.
Yep.
And then whatever is available, really. I make it work.
Beautiful. What about software? What are you using? Cubase, you said?
Pro Tools. Pro Tools. And we love to crash.
Yes. Fuck, I hate Pro Tools. Anyway.
Yeah.
What do you like about it?
I like the feel of it.
Yeah.
It just feels good. You know, it feels like I feel fast. I like to comp takes. Editing is a breeze, even though it introduces artifacts as well. The more I work, the more I find that there are no ideal solutions. Unfortunately, there are always sacrifices in the audio world. So yeah, it's fast when you need it to be. It's precise. I started in Logic, and I still compose electronic music in Logic.
Yep.
But one day I was mixing an album, and I clicked somewhere without any visual representation of what happened, and the sound changed.
Oh God!
And it fucked me. Like, how the hell can I trust the software when I'm in the zone and I'm like reaching out for a plug and I'm looking for it, and I click somewhere and the sound changes and it doesn't feel the same anymore. And so I stopped using Logic for...
I've heard a couple of horror stories like that. One, my mate Trav, he had a full mix and it was like very close. It was probably, I think it was like 90% finished.
Yep.
And something happened with the routing.
Yep.
And all of the busing changed and he couldn't get it back to how it was. And his mix was ruined. He had to start again. So I've heard a few horror stories like that.
Well,
which
I
was
save.
No good.
I have a OCD on saving.
Oh, yeah.
So I save like every 10 minutes, and my backups are every minute.
Yeah.
But when Pro Tools crashes, it likes to delay the backup. Sometimes it's like I didn't save, and I'll crash as well.
Fuck. Damn.
Yeah. But that's
these things
still
happen.
like it.
Yeah.
Still like it. So I'm also on Universal Audio.
Great
plugins, love it. Also on Kush Audio, great plugins.
Yeah, I'm eyeing off
cool.
the UBK. I'm hoping it comes on Black Friday specials because
I'm subscribed. They're cheap, $160 per year, I think. Or like, and you got them all.
Yeah,
it's like actually that's the only subscription that I have. And I also use acoustic audio, so hit and miss. Some plugins are top tier. Like there is SSL collection, Send, and I've not been into SSL compressors before. I kind of didn't like the sound, but modern metal calls for it. So I started experimenting, and Acoustica Send sounds better than any other emulation by mile.
Unreal, yeah. I don't particularly like the inline compression on the E channels or anything like that. I can't find a consistent use for them. I do like the bus compressor. I think it gives it a bit of punch,
That's the one.
Yeah, but the in-channel compressors, there's something about it that just doesn't excite me. But yeah. What are your favorite, EQs in general?
Hard one.
Everyone says the Pro Q3 for obvious reasons.
It's not my favorite one. It's a technical tool. It's a surgical tool, and I hate the color of it. Like I hate that it's colorless. I love what it does, and I obviously use it as my first fixer. But then for colorful EQ, which excites me more, I would say I like a lot of Kush Electra, and I missed out on hardware deal for 1500 dual channel. I missed out and I still regret it.
Damn.
But the recall is bad. So it's kind of, maybe it's okay. So I like that one. I love the color of Neve 88RS console. I don't particularly find 1073 that applicable anymore, just in certain applications.
Yeah, right.
I like Mag, but Mag plugins are...
Yeah.
So the real one would be good, but I don't
absolutely.
have it. I use West Audio Hyperion, which is a USB controlled 500 series EQ. It's cool. It's nice.
I didn't know that existed.
Yeah. It's nice. It's not that expensive either. Well, I mean, the costs build up,
Sure,
but
yeah,
by
yeah.
itself, it's affordable.
Yeah.
And it's very nice. You can drive it,
Mm-hmm.
and it has a transparent top end, but with a bit of a sheen, similar to SSL EQ, but not quite that.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if I have
Yeah.
the favorite one.
No, that's
I
all
like
good.
the sound of analog tape a lot.
Yeah,
A lot.
yeah.
So I try to implement that where
Yeah.
applicable.
Well, I think for the style of music that you make, you have to have emulations of hardware gear. Otherwise, it just won't sound.
Yes.
It'll sound too sterile, like you were
Yes.
saying before.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah, if you're only using, stock plugins or
No.
transparent ones, you're just not going to get a sound. You're going to get something that is forgettable and not exciting.
In my productions, I use shit ton of coloring plugins, just to a point where my computer craps out, and my computer is very powerful, quite literally.
Yeah.
And I also use a lot of outboard.
Yes.
My whole mix goes through louder than lift off Silver Bullet,
yeah.
if you know that one.
Unreal, yeah.
Amazing color. That's actually the one piece I would recommend anyone to get, because you can record vocals through it too.
Yeah.
There are two preamps, so there are preamps as well as color through the mix bus. Mint.
Unreal.
For the money, it's just
Yeah. I've seen a lot of people.
and so I just try to energize my mixes this way, and it works. It truly works. And my philosophy for outboard gear was getting colors that are unavailable in the box. So I'm not quite intending to get another SSL or distressor. There are so many emulations of distressors, right?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I've seen comparisons, and yes, the outboard is better. But at the same time, is it going to be miles better so that I'm going to be reaching out for it? Recall is no good.
Yep.
Whereas my decomp, it's not matched in the box. My Neve 5043, Acoustica made it, but other than Acoustica, no one else did it. Louder than Liftoff, it's not.
It's one of a kind, yeah.
And therefore, I try to focus on some unique pieces that bring up something that is missing in the box rather than building up on what we already have.
Fascinating. I love the talk about just like this, the different plugins that people like to use, because it's so specific to what you like, and that is exactly what gives you a sound, which is what people search for. It's like what I would encourage people to do is to really experiment with different EQs and compressors and all of those sorts of things, so that you can go, you know what, I love that plugin, whatever it is, for that purpose, and that's going to give me my bass sound or my vocal sound or whatever. Yeah,
and plus the way to understand the real character of the sound is to push it hard. You got your channel strip emulation, you put it, drive the line up, and then you hear the character.
Correct.
And sometimes I prefer it driven. Sometimes I just bring it in parallel, and I love it.
Oh, there's many times, I would say 50% of the time, where I will purposefully drive guitars to get that crunch that you can't get from just normal distortion. So love it.
Absolutely.
Tell me about some of the hacks that you have found over time, workflow wise. Like what are the things that you go, okay, now I know that that's going to make my mixing, recording, whatever, quicker?
Well, for mixing, it's definitely a template, good template. And then I am currently on my iteration 7 of my template. Okay. And that's a good one now.
Let's expand on that. What is involved in your template?
So my template involves all the routing, all the buses. I particularly have all the drum mics stemming into kick output, snare output, toms output, cymbals and ambience output, and then all stems into a drum bus. Then I have drum reverbs, 3 or 4. Then I have 4 parallel compressions. All of that stems into a drum sum bus. And similarly, we have bass, a bit less of that though, guitars, synths, vocals, all of that. It's all routed, it's all stemmed. Plus I have all the plugins set up for every channel that I normally reach out to. They are inactive. They don't have any parameters dialed in. These all go from scratch. But the chain is there, and it's like, I don't need to go and search for a plugin in my library, which is pretty massive. I just have it and I just activate it. Sometimes I do search, and that's when I notice, okay, the time to make a new iteration of my template. So that's definitely set. All the routing, all the groups, all the VCA faders, because I like to ride my faders.
That's awesome.
I also normalize audio before entering into my template.
Sure.
So there is a script on Mac that allows to normalize by -18 or -20 decibels, so that you don't have to move faders as much at the beginning. Sometimes it gives a too quiet sound, though. Sometimes it normalizes based on the highest peak, and if that's no good, then But I kind of find it better. Anyways, so that's what goes into mixing, and never stop improving on that. Recording wise, it's become easier and easier once I figured out my settings for my outboard, because I have a preamp and analog compressor for my vocals. It's and I found the sweet spot, and it's like, you have the sweet spot, you move around it rather than dialing in it from scratch.
Correct.
And it's easy. It's just, okay, I can see, it's taking up to 8 decibels. And that seems like a lot, but in reality, it's not. It's fine. And you just keep it there. Don't worry about that. With guitars, I'm still improving my workflow, and because as I mentioned, I start to dive into modern territory, and it's a different guitar sound. It's much more mid-focused and less trebly at all. But I use a reactive load box. I don't mic up a cab because I'm at home. Never did. Just a load box which acts as a cab. Very similarly. And I have a massive library of impulse responses. And I expand on that, and I just create presets which you can come around. You can find different microphones in that same library. And just tweak based on.
Absolutely.
So just more presets on that.
Love it, man. I love it. Before we start to wrap up, what I like to do is, even though you've already shared so much advice, I would like to know, first of all, advice to producers and engineers, and then advice for artists.
Okay. Advice for producers and engineers is, I would say, never try to go with trends and the sound that is trendy, rather than try to find out what you like in particular in that sound of trends, and try to get that, steal that as an inspiration and build upon, and try to find the ways you can achieve parts of that sound, but also combine it with other inspirations, and just, instead of trying to mimic something, go with you and your own unique path. Because in this industry, what I find, the competition is fierce, and the only thing that works is being yourself and building up on who you are, building up on your unique influences, and then sharing the sounds that you can dial in order for others to respond to it. So doing lots of experimentation on sounds is probably my biggest advice.
Beautiful.
And the advice for artists will be, work as hard as you can and then work harder. Because I see a lot of artists half-assing release strategies, half-assing approach for recording. And some people just ignore the fact that recording will be fucking hard if you want to achieve the best sound. And it will challenge you, and it will fuck you over, and you will be recovering bad. If you've done that, you've done a good job. If you haven't, maybe you're lucky, but maybe you should try to push yourself a bit more. And if anything, focus on release strategy these days. It's so fierce and competitive. I've released my music lately. It's been insane.
Bro, I can't even, that's why, not the only reason why I haven't been focusing on my own music, but it's part of the reason is because it's just, it's a lot of work if you want to do it right. And I don't believe in doing something unless you do it properly.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
Love it. Thank you so much for joining me today, man. It's been awesome.
Yes,
where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram, Dr. Mike Metal, with underscores. You can find me on Facebook, Mike Trubetskov, or Dr. Mike Metal, or I think you'll find me, no problems.
We'll have links in the show notes anyway.
And my website is EOLstudios.com.
EOLstudios.com. Unreal, man. Thanks. Anything that you want to finish up with?
Not really. I think we're good.
Beautiful.
That was amazing.
Beautiful. Thank you, man. Thanks. I really appreciate it. And thanks to everyone for checking us out. Best thing that you can do for us is to obviously like, but share, this around, this podcast.
Yes.
We want to get this advice to as many people as possible. And the best thing that you can do is share it with a friend or share it on your socials. The other thing is make sure you hit follow or subscribe on the platform that you're listening or watching this on so that you can stay up to date with every new episode and all of the bonus episodes that I like to release as well. So thanks again, and we will see you next time on What's That Sound podcast.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to What's That Sound? Make sure you hit follow or subscribe on your podcast platform to stay up to date with each new episode. We'll catch you next time.